Now it started, yes. All right. So everyone, please take your coffees and come in. We have a second day, an excitement day. So I would like to invite my colleagues, Anna Garcia, Lars Nagel, Ulrich Ale, and Boris Otto on the stage. And like to actually recap of what happened yesterday and what we are going to do today. So let's start with Ulrich.
Yeah, first of all, I think we had a great first day, a great start into this Data Spaces Symposium here in Warsaw. Thank you, first of all, for all who organized this event, especially also the team providing the technique and also the hotel staff. Imagine how often they reset this room yesterday. It is really an impressive work. And it was impressive to see that we had 810 registrations here for the 2 days. Some of you joined us just today, so to those of you, a warm welcome, and please take your seats as we hear it in the background. And we have participants from more than 40 countries. And this is clearly an indication that data spaces are becoming global. We have participants from the US, from Africa, from Asia. And later, or even after our session here, we will have a presentation from China explaining how data spaces are now part of the Chinese strategy. And for all these activities, it became clear data does not stop on borders. Data are global, and the idea of data spaces to enable global business processes of our end users, and we are all doing this to be able to provide services to the end users, to solve their business challenges, to improve their data-driven business, and this needs to be realized on a global scale. We cannot stop here on European borders. And we saw yesterday excellent presentations underlining this, for example, from Japan, how Japan is driving these activities. And what also became clear, Lars, I think, the technology is there, is available.
Yeah, that's really the great news. So in the last years we have focused a lot on technology and, well, coming up with the fundamental concepts and making that available. And the good news is that that is solved, and it is solved on many dimensions. So we have like technical components that are available. We also have like a diversity, and that is most relevant. So we know that data spaces, appear in different flavors. They are serving different needs, so therefore we need different solutions. It is important for us to listen to the community, to the users of data spaces, what they really want to have, which requirements they need. And yesterday in my closing speech, I used that analogy of like when the first bicycle was built. So the first bicycle was one with a big wheel and a small wheel, and it was super impractical and dangerous to ride on it, but you could ride on it. And then it was the community of women and men giving feedback like, okay, we need better bikes. So, and then we ended up with a bike with identical wheels, with a gear shift, with inflatable tires. And now riding a bike is fun. And that is what we see in data space technology. So it's all resting on fundamental concepts and also global standards. We are on our way. We see that happening. That is great. We see frameworks. So we believe in open source software developments and these vital, thriving communities. And then a plethora of solutions is built on that. You can get inspired in the different sessions, so in the other room and later that day, that you just can do it and implement it. And there's more than technology, because data spaces are a holistic endeavor. We need to consider more things, and that is what we are jointly doing in the DSSC, Boris, right? And we have great success there.
Yeah, in fact, Lars, that's true. I mean, yesterday we had in the entire afternoon an entire track about the new version of the so-called blueprint of the Data Spaces Support Center. In fact, it's the version number 2. And I must say it's really an astonishing work that has been done over the last 2.5 years, more or less, not only by the partners of the consortium in the DSCC, but in fact by the entire community, because the Data Spaces Support Center functions as some sort of, let's say, forum for joint knowledge creation. And what we basically do is using the community of practice, which is headed by Anna, for example, to reach out to all of you and to, well, identify what works and what best practices are when it comes to data spaces. And we basically use that and develop out of that what we call, as I said, a blueprint and particular building blocks that form a reference for your individual implementation. So that's very good, and it's really a very comprehensive but still concise and usable form of presenting the leading edge best practice knowledge on data spaces. And also I'd like to point to the fact that in line with what Lars said, the lack of technology is not an excuse any longer to start your data space endeavor, because technology is there. We have seen that throughout the day yesterday. And in the Data Spaces Support Center, we also ask you to hand in your technology that is suitable to run data spaces or certain components of data space as a service. So we have a brief form. I will probably repost it on LinkedIn. Please make sure that you register your solution there, because in the end, that's where the rubber hits the road, right? So we need to implement data spaces so that they are consumable services, coming back to Ulrich, to make sure that value is created through the sharing of data. And that's actually a good thing. And also I should say, and then I should stop, but this is, I think, important. It is the European Data Spaces Support Center, because it is funded by the European Commission and is also, as we always say, the operational arm in implementing the European data strategy. But that does not mean that it basically is hard-coding European regulation or something. It's also open for others across the globe to look at it and to use it. And I'd like to refer to the speech that Björn Jurecki from the Commission gave yesterday, where he explicitly mentioned that it's of the highest interest of Europe to make sure that data also flows across borders, as Ulrich also said. And I think the Data Space Support Center made a kickstart, which can be adopted nicely across the globe. And not only that, we would be very, very happy to receive ideas for improvement, also not only from European partners, but also from outside Europe and across the world. And I think that's also in line with the spirit of today and yesterday. And I'm more than happy to continue our work on this endeavor.
And Boris, I would like to add one thing. It is not only about adopting it, but it is about really adapting it to the local legislation in the different regions outside of Europe, and still to make it interoperable on a global scale. And I think this is very important to increase also the acceptance of the end users in the regions outside of Europe.
That is true. So if I may add on that, you know, we keep talking about architectures, and I mean, if you build, for example, a house, you have to take, let's say, certain things as granted, which can't be changed. For example, the laws of nature and the laws of physics, right? And for us, let's say, I'm a researcher, I work for Fraunhofer. My context factors is regulation, so I don't have the ambition to set regulation, but I just take it as granted and try to come up with technology in order for users to ideally and as best as possible adopt to it in Europe, but also in other places of the world. Exactly.
Yeah, and well, now that we know, we have observed this global movement, this technology readiness, and also this referential point with the SCC and the blueprint. And good morning, by the way, to everyone. Something that we have noticed, I think, evolving, and it has been very clear yesterday, and this event is the interlink between data and AI, and it's not only in Europe, it's global. We had very good presentations yesterday about it, and now it's in all the speeches, right, and all the organizations also, so we don't separate more data spaces and AI, and in both directions, we know we've been talking about how data space can really boost AI and innovation, but also the other way around, and there will be a lot of discussions, and there were yesterday, how we can make our data spaces more efficient as well with AI. And with this, I think what is important, we will have more and more investments on artificial intelligence, and we need to think what kind of AI we want to develop in Europe. We have all these AI factories that we will be presenting later today. So this community here, what do we have to offer there? What is our value proposition? So I see that the dialogue is really evolving in the right direction. And that's very important that we interlink the communities, the technologies, and now we move in this, as Boris always says, this data and AI value chain. I like that very much. So I reuse it, but it's definitely a differentiation factor from this event to previous events. And as I said yesterday and also today, we will have a lot of talks and speeches, and a lot of things happen during the breaks as well. So with many of you, we have these actions in this domain of data and AI for the future, and I hope, during the months to come, we also keep working on this domain. And of course, AI is all about value and about, and I think, Chandra, you also have very important message, right, about economics and sustainability.
Yeah, so yesterday there were discussions about data space business viability. So I'd like to leverage on Lars's example of bicycle. So when someone created a bicycle first, I think there was a 90% of the community around them, they said that, why do we need that? We have very good legs and we can walk everywhere, right? But once it has been tried by one person, and then people saw the economic benefit out of it, that they could save a lot of time, they could travel much more further than walking on there. And I think when data spaces word has started, I started hearing also the similar kind of criticism that, what it solves. But now it's very obvious that from yesterday's discussions and the discussions around what we are having now, there is an economic viability, there is a sustainability, there is a reason why a data spaces needs to be implemented and actually spread across to solve the problem. The data flows across the borders, for example, the trade, which we are talking about, which needs a lot of data for checking, for example, the use cases. Many use cases are coming up, which are obviously going into the direction that, okay, a lot of these use cases can be made easy, can be solved by using data spaces. And I think all these use cases will create a business viability and a sustainability for data spaces. So it's not the question about whether we actually have to invest in the data spaces, but it is the question that how do we find the different business models for different data spaces to sustain themselves and keep them operational. I think this is something that which we are going to talk a lot in coming sessions and also in the near future. And I think this is very obvious now that this basically becomes a very business-oriented. It's not only creating keeping the data sovereignty and data flowing across the borders, but also it's creating a new economy which would actually sustain itself and take it forward. So this is what I think that is happening all the way with AI. It's a mandatory thing that there are a lot of issues which are coming with AI. The data spaces can provide a solution for it. That's what.
Then over to you, Chandra.
Yeah.
No, Lars.
Yeah, so thank you for that inspiring talk. So we try to summarize what has happened yesterday. Well, thank you for that summary. And now we move on with the program for today. Big hand for all of us. Yeah. So please recall the numbers that Ulrich mentioned. So we have like more than 800 registrations. And today, so there's already something happening in the other room. So please be not surprised that we are like a smaller group here. There's already interesting things going on over there. it's my pleasure to now announce the next thing. And we are talking about like, data spaces become global. I think Boris mentioned it. It's like we're working on global standards. So everyone's fine. What Boris said is like we are building global standards, and we are not like designing that for Europe. And we need to find the balance between a global standards, so something that works for all economic areas, for all legislative areas, but we also need to respect local national specialities. That is what Ulrich was referring to as well. Yesterday we heard a lot about Japan, and I'm super happy that we have such a big Japanese community here today with us. We have a big European communities. Yesterday we've seen really a lot of people from all over the world, also supranational institutions like OECD that also take care and are interested in data spaces. But I would really like to see other economic areas. So we also had like US now, and we have Brazil. So we have some Brazilian representatives. You can take my microphone. And maybe, can you just share with us what is going on in Brazil? So we've seen that Brazil has like adopted or embraced the European data strategy and come up with an own one, which is an impressive document. And just some, sorry, it's spontaneous, but some experiences. What is going on in Brazil? And maybe next year, what can we show on that stage here?
Okay, so thank you, Lars, for the introduction. My name is Mateus. I'm from Eldorado Institute in Brazil. It's a big pleasure to be here today. Actually, we are at the very beginning stage of the data spaces journey in Brazil nowadays. We are discussing with Brazilian government, we're discussing with some companies how to implement data spaces in Brazil, the benefits of it. And of course, we are seeing a lot of resistance from companies in sharing data. So it's very important to explain for all of them the benefits of sharing data, how we can leverage new solutions or new features in Brazil by implementing new data spaces. So in this year, we have a plan to implement the first data spaces in Brazil that is more focused on the industrial part, maybe for machinery maintenance. So we are very excited to be the first one in Brazil for data spaces. We're having a great support from ADSA in this topic. I have to thank Sonia, which is giving us a great support. So we'll be very excited to be here next year and show our progress in this matter, okay?
Thank you very much for the spontaneity. Mateus, all the luck, and please, so it's on manufacturing, so we know that a lot is happening in that area. This is the man, get connected to him. Let's, bring that idea forward. Thank you very much for being here. And now, thank you for the tech team to work on it. So, what's going on in China? So, we were discussing when preparing the symposium, what do we need to show? And, we have heard, shortly before Christmas and beginning of that year, the announcement from China that they are building 100 data spaces. And we would at least like to share that with you. So this is definitely a new player on the road, and we are super happy that Professor Liu Dong from Beijing, from the China Future Internet Engineering Center, will give us an overview of what is happening there. And I tell you, that is really a lot, and it's inspirational. And the good thing, it's already like embracing a lot of groundwork that we have done in our community, and it has been mentioned, so value creation happens on global scale. Data sharing does not stop at borders. So therefore, we also should integrate China into our thoughts on data spaces. And we will see a video with a subtitle, but there's a lot of information, so we think it is inspirational for you. So enjoy the show and have a great day. Please start the video.
各位数据空间的专家和朋友们，大家好。 非常有幸参加 Spaces Symposium。今天我想用10分钟的时间，与大家一起交流中国数据空间的发展趋势，以及未来开放数据空间网络，希望能给各位带来一些启发。中国的数据战略及政策体系正在不断的制定和完善当中。2020年提出了加快培育数据要素市场，2022年建立了数据要素的基础制度体系，2023年组建了国家数据局，一直到去年底，数据空间行动计划和国家数据基础设施指南陆续出台，到今年初的公共数据的相关政策的发布，我们可以看到，以确立数据为生产要素，构建制度体系，再到具体行动计划和指南，已经形成了一套完整的政策架构。在谈到数据空间之前，我首先解释一下数据流通的一些现状。如果把数据量比作这个冰山，那我们可以看到，能够利用的数据只是冰山的一角。即使号称已经用完整个互联网数据的大模型的训练，也只占数据量的20%。我们有大量的数据属于私有数据，如公共数据、医疗数据、学术数据以及各位的电子邮件、聊天记录、浏览记录等等。这些无法通过搜索引擎找到的私域数据占到了90%。也就是说，我们有大量的高质量的数据，并没有充分的利用起来，也存在着巨大的挖掘和利用的空间。那么多的数据，为什么没有流通起来呢？从中国来看，应该存在着以下几个方面的问题：一是不敢共享，例如企业和个人不敢共享私有数据，担心数据被复制、权属被侵犯；二是不愿意共享，因为权责不清晰、收益模式不明确，对违规责任存在着顾虑；最后是不敢共享，技术通道不畅通，包括数据发现困难、没有流通平台、互联互通受阻以及缺乏技术管控能力等等。为解决这些问题，数据空间成为多个国家主要的推进路径。例如，欧盟出台了欧洲数据战略，在数据架构上推动医疗健康、智慧城市、汽车工业等领域的数据流通。美国则依托云服务商在 SaaS 层面构建云间的全球数据流通管道。中国拥有丰富的场景、数据量大的特点，所以更倾向于推动云端结合的模式，发展数据空间。首先明确，数据空间的行动计划的目的是为了促进大规模的数据的流通利用。从场景上看，行动计划在设计5类数据空间的同时，提出了3大功能、5大支撑体系和3大重要的保证。其中最重要的是3大的能力，包括具有数据的可控管控能力、互联互通数据的交互能力、形成价值的共创能力。那么企业、行业、城市和跨境以及个人这5类数据空间，从多层次、多维度推动数据流通。城市数据空间以公共数据为牵引，带动数据的融合和利用，赋能我们城市的治理和产业发展。企业数据空间则定位在链主企业，带动上下开放数据共享，统一数据的标准和接口，龙头企业可以快速整合产业链上的数据资源，不断的提升企业内部的协同效率，优化生产流程，还能为上下游企业提供数据支持上下游企业提高生产运营水平。行业数据空间多以龙头企业联合开展数据规模化的共享流通和融合应用，通过行业数据空间形成行业的数据池，为产业的升级带来更加全面准确的数据服务。例如海尔、长信、长虹、海信这些家电巨头，基于家电回收这一共同的场景，共同构建这个家电回收的数据空间。个人数据空间则在个人数据的权益的基础上，探索价值的合理授权和利用。这一块可以参考韩国的 MyData 模式。同时，我们可以看到，基于 Web3 和区块链的一些技术模型也在这个方向的发展。个人数据呢，因为涉及到隐私保护以及各种各样的法律法规等等，所以在未来的发展呢，些许会稍缓慢一些。跨境数据空间呢是非常现实的需求，依托数据空间呢可以通过技术践行 跨境规则的自动化的实施，构建数据的跨境的监控、存证、管控的能力体系，保障数据在跨境过程当中的安全性和完整性。当然，这5种数据空间，它不是泾渭分明的，也会是交叉、复合、融合，形成多元化的发展模式。那么，数据供得出、流得好、用得起，是我国数据产业发展的方向。数据空间未来的发展，在我看来，快速演进成为开放数据空间网络。从技术架构上来看，底层构建以 IPv6 下一代互联网为底座的高速数据网络，提升灵活性和安全性，实时调配数据传输的带宽和质量。架构核心是利用数据空间开展数据流通共享，辅助以沙箱、隐私计算等技术实现数据的可信流通。在顶层构建多元化的数据空间，同时全程辅助以区块链实现加密存证和溯源，并探索基于 Web3 的评估体系和资本化的道路。回顾互联网的发展，最初网络是孤立的，仅限于特定的研究和军事用途。为了实现不同网络之间的互联， TCP/IP 协议被引入，逐渐成为互联网的通讯标准。互联网也从孤立走向开放互联的转变。90年代万维网的引入，使互联网变得更加易于访问和使用，我们见证了信息爆炸性的增长。如今，移动互联网、万物互联改变了我们获取和分享信息的方式，已经成为现代社会的一个重要支撑。参照互联网，开放数据空间网络的演进，也将从各自封闭的数据空间，通过标准化的数据连接器实现互联和即时交互，形成开放数据空间。然后随着认证机制和标准化体系的成熟，又推动不同数据空间之间的互联互通。接下来将是随着海量数据的接入，不同行业、不同区域乃至个人数据空间的互联，将构建一个全球范围内的开放数据空间网络。它不仅仅强调这个数据主体的连接和数据的自由流动，同时也更加注重数据的管理和高效的安全利用，势必成为数字经济发展的一个重要基础设施。中欧数据空间是工程中心联合 IDIC、华为等公司合作推动的一个试点项目。欧盟建立了碳关税的机制，已经在钢铁等行业开展实施。我国也将双碳提升到国家层面，陆续发布了相关的政策和指南。该实践在推动中欧之间的碳排放跨境数据安全流通的同时，还能够进一步实现技术互认、结果互认。刚刚提到跨境数据空间方面，我也找到一些案例，如粤港澳科研科创数据空间，基于数据空间和 IPv6 技术形成了一整套内嵌规则加管理体系加技术认证的三轮驱动的数据跨境的流通模式。国际数据空间 IDIC 是全球安全和实现数据自主权的生态体系的先驱，其核心的数据空间协议 DSP 通过控制平面协调关键功能，确保后操作性、监控和数据策略引擎，确保合规和安全性，身份认证和身份提供商保证数据的所有权。数据连接器连接异构系统，实现无缝集成。通过将管理和执行的分离 DSP， 使企业能够遵守监管架构的同时，保持对数据流的控制。IDIC 的愿景在 DSP 的支持下，将分散数据的孤岛变为可信的协同网络，推动产业的创新。DSP 的发展可以帮助大家实现互操作性，它规范了不同系统间的数据交换，打破了数据间的行业间的壁垒。通过解决语义的互操作性的问题， DSP 可以确保数据不仅能够传输，而且能够被普遍理解，其可扩展的架构可支持海量数据的生态体系，而不会降低性能。IDIC 在推广 DSP 的方面的领导作用正在重塑全球的数据产业。从跨境供应链到人工智能驱动的分析， DSP 的统一架构促进数据共享当中的信任和效率。那么最后，数据空间的未来 在推进过程当中将面临着技术规则和思想意识的非常大的一些挑战，但我相信在我们在座各位的共同努力下，数据空间一定会是潜力无限，大有可为。我今天的演讲到此结束，祝大会圆满成功，谢谢。
That actually proves that how we are aligned globally, isn't it? So that's next, and then we have next on the stage data spaces in Flanders, a practical use case, both beautiful ladies here, Justine and Stefani. And yeah, I think.
You don't need it anymore?
I don't think so.
And I'll need the clickers as well.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right, good morning. Thank you for the introduction. So that's Justine. She's a way bigger expert on interoperability than I am. So I'm very glad that she's standing here with me today.
Yes, and so as mentioned, this is Stephanie. We both work for the Flemish government, but she's working for Flanders way longer than I am, so I, on my part, am glad that she's standing next to me. And she, in Flanders, works on a data space for public administration, specifically for cities and communities in Flanders.
Yes, and dive into our story, we would like to invite you all to come and find. Whoops, I think my mic is going up and down. So we would like to invite you all to come and find us afterwards, because we are convinced that all of you will have good practices, lessons learned, tips and tricks that we can take home with us, and hopefully also maybe come to some collaborations in the future.
Yes, and I know it's still early, but we will check if you are still awake and with us by asking some questions from time to time and see if you still understand what we are saying and sharing with you. So first, before we dive into the concrete use cases, I want to show what we did in Flanders. The last 3 or 4 years, we had a public-funded project called Flanders Smart Data Space. And it was the idea or the goal to boost the data economy in Flanders and beyond to make us AI ready and digital twin ready. We did that based on 4 pillars in 2 different domains. The first pillar in the middle here is the workbench, and you can actually see it as a workbench, a toolkit with all of the tools you need into a data space with you. Depending on the role you have in the data space ecosystem, the tools, the open source, software components, building blocks are in the toolbox. A second one next to the toolbox is the standards. We have two parts in that pillar. On the first hand, we have the semantic standards. The semantic standards is called the Oslo program. Someone in this room already knows the Oslo program? Yes, I see some hands, so happy to see that. The Oslo program stands, it's not the city in Norway, it's the Open Standards for Linked Organizations program with a specific method and procedure to get to valuable standards, semantics, which we come through together with private and public organizations. We agree on semantics and a shared data model. We have over 100 standards by now, and they are coming handy while building data spaces. Another part in the standard pillar is the linked data event stream. That's a technical standard that we push forward because we really believe in the power of linked data in Flanders. The linked data event stream is also supported by the SEMIC program of the European Commission. So we have our workbench, we have our standards, all technical parts that come in handy. but we are not building them for ourselves. We are building them for and together with the Flanders ecosystem. The ecosystem exists of private parties, of public organizations, the Flemish region, but also local communities and cities in Flanders. And we want them to adopt the standards and build data spaces for them, with them, and we do it in different roles, but we come back to that later. Then we have already 3 pillars, and we thought the 4th was just coming at the end, our governance framework. But we actually see that this was the most valuable pillar. The governance framework really sets the roles, defines who does what, with what responsibilities, with what are the conditions to onboard new data or new stakeholders, and when I am participating on a data space, what is my responsibility, my cost, my value, into the bigger picture. So this is just a Flanders story, already something and quite some work we did there. But let's see the bigger picture, because Flanders is just actually a really small region. So we have the Flanders story, and we have the different domains we are already active in. The yellow ones, we are talking, building, onboarding with the network in all several domains. We are situated in the building blocks, the middleware, what we did in our project, and we are pushing towards AI, towards digital twins. And we didn't do this alone. Along the road, we were inspired, advised, and we collaborated with a lot of partners in a very broad ecosystem. We went there with all Flemish partners. We had the Belgian Data Space Alliance so far, whom we are sharing insights, learnings with. We have Interoperable Europe, the Data Space Support Center, FIWARE, IMEC, a lot of partners who helped us along the roads to anchor what we did in Flanders, to have a broader output, to have a broader adoption with our story in Flanders. So that's the bigger picture. This is what we've done, but let's now see how we have done it with concrete use cases.
Yes, I know there was a hand raised yesterday with the same question, but who of you is actually working currently on data spaces? Everybody, I guess, probably, yeah. Maybe mobility-related data or water-related data. These are 2 of the data spaces that we are working on as well, along with a health data space and the public administration's data space. All 4 of them are not longer in a startup phase, but aren't the full-scaled cross-Europe or global data space that we would like them to be one day, but then again, Rome wasn't built in a day either, so we keep on working on that. And for each data space, we had a different motivation, and we had also a different role we took upon us. Zooming in on the mobility data space, this one was top-down, use case-driven. The Flemish government was looking for a good use case to build a data space on. So we solicited our partners in the ecosystem that Justine showed you. And they came up with the idea to work with the traffic counts in Flanders to build a data space upon. So we took upon the role to orchestrate that, and we mainly focused on providing the technical building blocks for the data publishers in this use case.
Yes, next to then the top-down approach in mobility, there was in the water domain more kind of a bottom-up approach. This was not Flanders that said that a data space would have been great. It were the stakeholders within the water domain itself that gathered and agreed to work together, because all just by themselves they cannot overcome a water flood or water shortage. So by working together, sharing data and insights, they came with the opportunity to build a water data space, and there it is Flanders' role to assist them, and it's with them, with those stakeholders in the water domain, that we worked on our governance framework. They were really interested in what is their own role, how can they work better, how can they share costs, responsibilities, while sharing water data. A third one is not bottom-up or top-down. It is Europe that stated that all countries should organize themselves on the European Health Data Space Regulation. So there it is obligated to do a data space on health data, and there it's the role of Flanders to help support not only the Flemish governments on health, but also the federal level, and support them in getting the technical standards, in getting the governance framework ready. So that was what we are doing now together with the health sector.
All right, and our last use case, the public administration's data space, might be the one existing in Flanders for the longest of time, even before we all started talking this much about data spaces. Cities and communities in Flanders were obliged to publish their local decisions as linked open data, so we could reuse them for other purposes as well. Even back then, I think 7 or 8 years ago, or maybe even a bit longer, we were convinced that keeping the data decentralized at the origin, together with bringing it through centralized agreements and standards together for reuse, would be a good practice, and it has been proven. We also feel that cities and communities are now adopting and searching for opportunities to pitch in on the reuse of their own data. So we are taking upon the role of a booster towards an actual data space. And for this one, for all 4 of them, but specifically for this one, we are also hoping for private initiatives to pitch in on realizing the value of a data space.
Yes, so that was kind of a wrap-up on what we have been doing, and how we have been doing it in Flanders and beyond. Let's now kind of wrap up with all of our knowledges, to start with our successes. On top, the first success we can share is our workbench that I mentioned in the beginning, the living open source building blocks that are well documented and ready to adopt. We brought them from technology level, readiness level 1 to 9, so now every company in Flanders and in Europe can adopt our connectors, our open source building blocks. A second one, the Oslo program is already up and running for 20 years now. And we see even growing adoption with the standards, also with the linked data event stream. All parties agree that it is a great standard and they want to adopt them to share their data more fluent. A third one that I'm very happy about is the living governance framework. It brings people together, it starts a discussion, and they are talking about their role, how they can share, what they can share, what about their metadata, what about their standards. So the living, I call it the living framework, is a great success, I think.
Yes, indeed. That brings us to what we see as our fourth success, the fact that the concept of data spaces for us has proven to be a conversation starter for collaboration. You might say as much as a matchmaker, or as I'd like to say, Tinder for interoperability. But because we needed to explain what data spaces were, people came together, organizations came together, and they started talking more to each other in the sense of, oh, you have got that kind of data, I would like to reuse it, but you have got that kind of data, and we would like to reuse it. How can we do that? How can we collaborate? So, yeah, conversation is thriving. We might not have the 100 data spaces that China is aspiring, but we are maybe having about 100 conversations towards collaboration, I guess, at this point. And our last success is thanks to our government. The Flemish government actively talks about interoperability. In the coalition agreement, it is mentioned a few times. We would have liked it to be even more, but that's okay. But we feel because our government actively talks about it, for us, it's easier to get parties involved and engaged in data spaces as well.
Yes, and we can say that those are our successes. But we're not there yet. There's much to learn.
Nonetheless, our successes, we still have some challenges to overcome. I'm going to start at the bottom of this slide. So at the beginning, we might have put too much attention and effort towards the technical building blocks, but as we have heard a few times already today and yesterday, technical solutions are there, we have them. We did encounter that it is often also very necessary to make sure that people have a shift of mindset to use those kinds of technical building blocks. It's very nice to have the whole workbench. If nobody wants to use it, pretty sad. So that's a lesson learned. That's something we might be struggling with a little bit. And the second one as well, collaboration requires trust. And that's maybe the one we are struggling with the most at this point. Like, how do we get parties to trust each other? So if people here have, who has tips for us on how to get parties to trust each other, please come and talk to us. We will be glad to hear about that. The water data space was a good example, but we did not find the way forward to transport it to other use cases. We will come to that probably. And incubation time, also, I think all of us are very convinced about data spaces and the value of data spaces. We might also be a little bit eager and enthusiastic, but in the timeline we put forward for data space, like 3 to 4 years, we forgot that there would be an incubation time. So for future projects, we have learned that 5 to 8 years might be more realistic to really get a data space to its full force.
Yes, I think I can agree on those. Fourth one is then cross the chasm. I think we here are together with the coalition of the willing, the coalition of the doing. We are building data spaces, we are learning and scaling it up. But now it's time to go outside these rooms, outside our willing community, outside the coalition of the willing, to get everyone on board. So let's search for ways, for tools, for communicating skills, to get everyone on board, to work on that trust, to work towards collaboration based on data spaces. Which brings me to the last one is, let's say data spaces are not the end game, but should be the way to go while sharing data and exchange data. But we noticed that interoperability is quite a motive already to go step by step towards data spaces, not only in Flanders, but beyond. So let's conclude that we have seen this here before, technology-wise, everything is possible. We have a lot of smart people in this room and beyond to build everything, to search everything out and make it work. So with data spaces, it's not quite a story of technology anymore, it's a story of collaboration. So let's find out together the way forward to go ahead and get everyone on board. Thank you for having us, and come please find us afterwards.
Thank you very much.
That was, thanks, Justine and Stefanie, and that was really great. And please reach out to them with ideas and collaboration opportunities, if anyone has. There was a lot of discussion about interoperability. So the key thing, and we have been talking about this quite a lot, about semantic interoperability and the interoperability at this. So to take this forward, I like to invite, understanding each other is key. So semantic interoperability is key. Semantic interoperability between the data spaces, between different countries across the borders is key. So this topic will be taken by George Lobo from CEMIC, and the stage is yours.
Yeah. Thanks, and welcome everybody. Thanks for giving me the floor. So I'm from the European Commission. I'm from the Directorate General for Informatics. How does this work? Yeah. That's it. So it was been mentioned and by Justine and Stefanie. They mentioned Interoperable Europe. Interoperable Europe was an initiative, so I will introduce to give a bit of context. It was an initiative from Digit to work with digital government, and it was an act that entered into force last year in April. And it's to support a network of sovereign and interconnected digital public administrations. And the idea is to support the digital transformation of public sector. And the Act proposed to have a cooperation framework with, I would say, people will say, yet another one, another board, but that's how it was done. But as well to the only obligation this regulation brings for member states as well as all EU institutions, so it applies as well to the Commission, Parliament, etc., is to have mandatory interoperability assessment to evaluate the impact of change when creating cross-border systems. And we have also, I mean, we will have the link, maybe you know, who knows Interoperable Europe in the room? So we still have some work to do. There are still a lot of people missing. And we have also a part, we are also investing quite a lot in innovative measures, the so-called GovTech domain. We have an incubator with a lot of partners, so we have also exploring the use of innovative technologies. So now it was the introduction to give the context. SEMIC, who knows SEMIC here? Ah. A bit more. So SEMIC, it has been around the block for, I mean, almost 15 years. So it's a semantic interoperability community. And it was the objective we have, I mean, since it was created, was to promote the semantic interoperability among member states. So creating the share and reuse of assets and tools, and also to reach to agreements in certain domains, to identify also opportunity for alignment of definition, and wearing also the awareness of importance and data management, which is not something needed to be done here, because here you have all convinced. And what we do, so we do a lot of things. So this is just a summary. I mean, our core work is to I mean, develop and maintain open specification, which are regulatory update to ensure that they are compliant with the evolving landscape of the digital regulation. We also do pilots to test sometimes specification, and I will come to that. I mean, we did some pilot on LDES. And we have also, we provide knowledge hubs, so trainings, guidelines, we publish studies, etc. So here you will have the link, you go to the SEMIC Support Center. So what we propose is, we say we propose semantic as a service. So as I say, we are quite active in specification and data models, which were our core business. After, we do a lot of pilots on different themes, so either to test a new specification or to experiment some new technologies. We're also trying, I mean, now we're organizing to see the interlink between what can bring AI to semantic interoperability, and with BDVA, we have a coming workshop organized next month. And we support as well people to develop data models in order to take into account semantic interoperability. So what I come on the core specification, which would be, so yesterday there was a meeting, I'm sorry, I don't have the memory of names, but I have memory of faces, but there was somebody saying that in one of the track sessions that, yeah, DCAT is good for publishing data catalog, but we need application profile. Good news, we do this. We have a number of application profile based on DCAT AP. We develop also core vocabulary. So here is a set of semantic, I mean, really basic vocabularies. Here you can see, I mean, this is our current specification. So you have vocabularies for a person, business, location, criteria and evidence, public organization, public event. These are, I mean, quite adopted by a number of member states. And all these core vocabularies, we align always with I would say, with the legislation. So you have the core person vocabulary is compliant with even EIDAS. We have BRIS, we have the core criterion and evidence for the single digital gateway. So we have always following, and the updates are following that, as well as the community. I mean, the way we work in CEMIC, it's totally open. Everything is on GitHub, so people can propose changes. We organize regularly also webinars to discuss the issues and the proposal. And normally we reach a sort of consensus during this webinar with member states, with the community, I would say. And for every specification, there is a working group where you can, of course, join if you're interested, if you want to adopt them, and maybe you could propose some changes. Continuing, so the application profile, we have one which is used and quite widely adopted. It's the core public service vocabulary application profile, so it's a way to describe, and it's implemented to describe public services in a country, and it's well adopted in a portal, for example, in public sector portals. I would say our star is DCAT-AP, so it's an application profile that became, in fact, a de facto standard for EU open data portals. And it follows it was start on a line with the Open Data Directive. And after, for that, we have a number of, I would say, extension of this. So we have for base registry, geospatial, which we built together with the community, statistical. We have the one for the high-value data set. We have also the ADMS AP, which is based on the W3C ADMS, to support that is used to present the solution on our portal. And we have the new kid on the block, which is modeling ML DCAT-AP, which is a data cuddling for AI systems. So now we have the second version. In addition to the large language models, it also allows to describe on the metadata the algorithms used by these systems. Here, DCAT-AP, I mean, to come back to that, we align. So we release, if there is a new version of DCAT, we realign it. So we do the work, and as well, we improve it in order to make it, to make it compatible and following the needs of the community. It's not that our goal is to have as much extension as possible. I mean, in fact, we're trying to minimize them because, for example, I take the example of the base registry DCAT-AP, which has been adopted as such for the procurement data space because everything was there, so they didn't need a specific extension. So that's also basically the idea. We don't want to have a collection because we know that after it implies a lot of work. So for data space, so as I was saying, so it's based on a well-recognized standard. We have a lot of implementation. I mean, the one being the data European data open data portal. We have also a community. I guess we have around 8 members in overall CEMIC community. So everything is available on GitHub on different serializations. So you can have the specification in RDF, in XML. And UML, I mean, machine-readable, human-readable format. So it's also to be able to be adopted, simplify the adoption. We have also the community on the CEMIC Support Center, so I invite you to join. And we are also organizing a number of events. So this is where you can know what are the events where you can also advertise. I mean, the interoperability portal is a community, is a collaboration platform, so you can also propose to publish your own event. I mean, we did the symposium is there, for example, if you go looking there. So DCAT-AP as a solution, I will not go because I think, I mean, let me ask another question. Who knows DCAT-AP here? Yeah, so it's quite known. So it's open, so I mean, and I will come to that, so because it became It has a very long history. We show that we were able to maintain, to follow, and to work on this open manner. We start also now with our colleagues of Connect to ensure that, I mean, it goes as well on the standardization path. So we are collaborating with our colleagues responsible for data space and with standardization organizations. And there is a full ecosystem. So here, I mean, you will have the slides. I mean, it helps to find the data. It helps to. We have also a very good experience in documenting. So the documentation is well. It's described for the, I would say, non-technical and both technical people. So we have really a vibrant community. And as well, there are other extensions. So it's already used in data space. One where we collaborate. So also for building extension, we have different levels of support. Either we co-create, which was like GeoDKTP, StatDKTP. Here we help, for example, the health DKTP, which has been the standard for the health data space. We have helped them to create it, but now they're handling on their own, and we provide support when necessary. We have on mobility, so on mobility DKTP, so this is maintained by the group NAPCOR. We also helped in the past to build a language DKTP for the language data space. And as I said, the public procurement data space, they just adopted one of our things, and I mean recently, but it has come quite some year. There is also EPOS DKTP, which is for an open science. So it has been created by the community of solid Earth observation, and since 2017, and they always align with the latest version of DKTP. So they have a full ecosystem, and now they even consider, in the context of EOSC, to make it also the metadata for all research infrastructure. So, and of course, I don't mention, we have a lot of national or regional extension that are done. I mean, as you know, Europe, we have different levels of, different types of governance for every country. So that's the thing. Here, it's a repetition, sorry for that. So here I just remind the ways, here I focus on the specification, but we're also doing pilots. So we're also looking for people who want to experiment. And I will come to that now in this part of the talk about LDES. We're looking for people who want to experiment with LDES. We also provide a sort of toolkit. So although we have been working with Oslo, but we want to open, a vast variety of tools that helps you to work toward achieving semantic interoperability. Of course, only open source tools, free of use. And we have the Knowledge Hub, so we have a number of courses as well on the academy. So for those who knows linked data event streams in the room. So not that very much, yeah, of course. So, this is something we did in collaboration with Digital Flanders. So, it came from Flanders. It was used, and we thought there was a potential. So it's a publication technology to share information via multiple parties, and it allows everybody, a network of people, to keep the data up to date. And the idea behind this tool is have up-to-date data, be aware of change, to also keep a track of historical data, and to be able to compare. So, just to give an example, and I will pass with the rest. In a classical model, if you take Willem that is living in Paris, Willem in the registry or whatever, you would copy the full set, which is normal. In 2020, you have Anne that moves to Lyon, so the usual model, you would copy the full table, the two names, and in 2021, Willem moves from Paris to Strasbourg, and you would also copy the old data, the old table. With linked data event stream, so the first step is equivalent, but the second, the linked data event stream will send only the fact that Anne now is in Lyon. And when Willem moves to Strasbourg, it will just update the record about Willem. So, I mean, I would say this can exist as well, but I mean, when you have multiple parties, and it's really easier in that way to keep your data up to date. So, for example, in the base registry, which is the case of Flanders, is that when you know, I mean, if you need to keep a central registry of the base registry of a person, it means that you have to copy a lot of data around, and you know that change happens, people are moving, people are changing jobs, etc. So it just sends the changes, and you can be made aware of the changes and what have been changes overnight. I mean, over in the stream. So we did it as well. So this is, I would say, also another implementation. So this has been also enabled into the Open Data Portal. So it's for sending changes in the DCAT-AP metadata on the Open Data Portal. So, and it's focused on aggregation and distribution, and now it's in production. It's not initial step, but now, I mean, also our colleagues from the data portal, they're looking for partners who wants to send the data using these linked data event streams. And so here is just summarizing. I will not go because along all the slides, because it's I did it just for the sake of reading, but just to give some advantage. So you don't need it forced to have an effort to synchronize the user, because a data user can just update the view and even by event. So it's really real time. There is it's, for example, registry data. You have one approach, you have multiple usage type, but you have a way to have collecting and sharing registry data. You just in one publishing system, so LDES, one publishing system is required, so, and after whoever reads it, it doesn't have an additional cost for the people who are providing the data. It allows also to recreate the data, but allowing user to attach even intermediary steps within. You can also add any API, so it can be published along other systems. And I will pass, and due to the streaming, I mean, anybody can use the LDES as well, the linked data event stream, to access historical records. So, I mean, the history is there, so you can even come back, compare what has changed. So you have a sort of history of the data, and only the data that has been changed. And you can even, if needed in your use case, you can revert the world back to the previous data. And so, and it's also rich. I mean, it's linked data, so you have also very rich in metadata, and it can be used in data portal, as we demonstrated with the Open Data Portal. And as I was saying, it is built on linked data. So we, for example, you can reuse existing linked data models together with LDES, and establish also interoperability with system as being the same concept. And of course, as part of CEMIC, we advise you. It's over. It's good because it's the end. So that was my last talk. Thank you. I mean, if you're looking, we have a booth, and you're welcome to come to discuss with us if you're interested in a pilot and to discuss further. Thanks.
Thank you, George. It was a wonderful presentation. Next, as we are running out of time, so I might have to ask audience to have some patience with coffee break. So now we actually like to call Eric Sampson from Microsoft to give a premiere on data spaces, a very high level view, almost even higher than the flights can fly, about data spaces for the newbies. We talk about a lot of advanced things right now, interoperability in data spaces, and I think we need to step back at some point of the time and say, what are these about? And Eric will tell that more.
Thank you, Chandra. So my name is Eric Sampson. I'm with Microsoft, and at Microsoft I'm involved in various activities around data spaces. And today I've been asked by the organization to deliver a new kind of presentation about data spaces. Because in general, data spaces presentation, they are quite complicated. The topic by itself is complicated. A data space is not a simple system. But let's find a way to introduce data spaces in a way that is very easy to understand, even by children, for instance, or lawyers, or politicians, whatever. So no complex slides, very simple slides. What's the value of data? You all know it. The value of data is 0 or close to 0 if the data stays in the data store, in the storage, in the database. The value is 0. But then, if you start to share data, then you create value around that data. And the beauty with digital assets is that the more you share and the more you increase the value of the data. And if you combine that data with data from other organizations, you create even more value. So that's something very important to understand. The value of data is increasing when you share data. Simple. It's like when you have an ID. If you have a good ID, it's in your mind, but you don't tell anybody about this ID. The value of this ID is 0. Just some electricity in your brain, but the value is 0. If you start sharing this ID with other people, then you will get advice, comments, feedback about your ID, and it starts to get some value, additional value. It starts to become real. The second reason why we want to use data spaces, in addition to increasing the value of data, is to be compliant with all the existing regulations. So we know that in Europe we have a lot of regulations around data, the DSA, the DMA, the DGA, the Data Act, the Interop Act, the AI Act, and many more. But we also have similar regulations in other regions. And we have industry regulation, we have sustainability regulation, we have a lot of reasons to share data. Sometimes we are obliged to share data. And even if we are not obliged, if we share data, we want to be compliant with the existing regulations in all the different jurisdictions. But the problem, once you start sharing your data, you don't know what's going to happen to your data once it has been transferred to another location, for instance. So that's the main problem. You would like to share data, but in general, you don't do it because of the risk associated with that. It's like when you share your ID, maybe someone is going to steal your ID and do something wrong with your ID, something that you didn't expect, something that you don't want. So it's the same. When you share data, there is a risk that there is a misuse of your data. Maybe the data is going to be forwarded to an illegitimate user. So the risk is increasing with sharing. So what is a data space at the end of the day? It's a trust context. How can I establish trust between two participants, two organizations? The strength of a data space relies on the fact that the participants can define policies around their data assets. And the policy system is a very flexible and very powerful one. You can express any kind of constraints, requirement around your data. You can define obligations on the other party, interdictions, limitations. It could be very versatile. For instance, you can say, I'm willing to share that data. It can be used to train a large language model, for instance, but it cannot be used for marketing purpose. You can say that the data can be used only for 45 days, or the data has to stay in Poland, for instance. So it's a very flexible and powerful system, very complete system. And one participant is going to define policies. On the other side, the other participant is going to provide claims. And the main mechanism of a data space is to match the claims to the policies. And when you can match enough claims to policies, at a given time, the participants, they can decide to trust each other, and then they can start the data sharing mechanism. So the trust is a way to reduce the risk. You cannot completely eliminate the risk. At the end of the day, you still have some risk, but the two parties, they agree that the risk is acceptable, and they decide to enter into a negotiation and a data sharing contract. So let's summarize the situation. Data value is increasing with sharing, but the risk is also increasing with sharing. So at the end, fortunately, we have a mechanism based on trust to reduce the risk. So at the end, the data space, based on the trust, is going to enable a new economy of data, because you can increase the value of data while reducing the risk of sharing the data, based on the trust. There are three main dimensions. If you consider trusted data sharing, there are three main dimensions to consider. The first one is the legal or regulatory aspect. There is a data sharing contract, and you must be able to check that the other participants are compliant with the local regulations in their own jurisdictions. So that's something to take into account. Then there is an economic or business or operational aspect. Sometimes, for instance, if you want to monetize the data between the participants, it's important to have a platform like a data marketplace, for instance. It's not mandatory. It's something that could be necessary in some systems, data sharing systems. And then you also have the technology layer. You need some technology to establish the connection between the different participants, to validate the claims, and to negotiate the sharing contract. So, how do we develop and deploy a data space? So first of all, you have different kinds of participants. You have providers, you have users, and you also have on the left side, the data space authority. At a given time, someone could be a provider, but the day after, it will be a user. And it can also be the data space authority. The data space authority is not necessarily an independent organization. It could be a function that is split between all the participants. So we have two organizations, and on the left, a data provider is describing some kind of data assets in a kind of catalog. We don't deep dive into the implementation details. There is a way to describe your data assets. And then the participant on the right is interested in some data assets. She's able to identify one interesting data asset. So now we are going to reconcile the policies and the claims from both sides, and we do that until there is enough confidence in the other parties so that they can decide to trust each other. And when it happens, they are going to sign a data sharing contract, and then and only then the party on the right is going to be able to access the data from the participant on the left. And it's very important to explain to everybody that a data space is not a giant data lake in the middle of all the participants. The data is going to remain with their owners. That's a key concept of data spaces, the decentralization. It's not a central platform in the middle of all the participants. Also, an important idea is the fact that each participant is going to host its own part of the global infrastructure. That's why it's not mandatory in a data space to have a middleware or a central platform or a single data space operator. The notion of a data space operator, the notion of a platform is split between all the participants in the data space. That's something that is very key because it provides what we can call digital autonomy to all the participants. In terms of implementations, as I said before, each participant is going to use what we call a connector to connect or to join a data space. With the connector, the data provider can publish data assets with all the policies that we have mentioned before. Another participant can discover an interesting data asset. Then two participants can enter into the negotiation phase that we have described before, that is the matching between the claims and the policies. And at the end, if they find an agreement, if they decide they can trust each other, then we can start orchestrating the actual physical data transfer. So that's for the connectors. And there is a well-known open source connector on the market that is the one from Eclipse, but you will find many other ones from Fireware, from other organizations. Most of them are open source. That's very important for data spaces adoption. So the key principles, as I said, open source. Open source is very important for data space because it simplifies adoption. So as a user, you can adopt a connector, but you can also adapt it, meaning that if the connector is not exactly what you want, you can still tune it, change it to suit your needs. Interoperability is very important because when a participant is using a connector, he must be able to be connected with another participant in the same data space using a different connector, or maybe connecting to another data space with other participants using other connectors. So interoperability is very important. Decentralized, I already explained before. And multi-cloud, that's the fact that each participant is hosting its own data space infrastructure, meaning that they can keep their existing cloud providers. There's no need to have a central cloud infrastructure in the middle. And then still in terms of implementation, you find guidance from IDSA and DSSC in terms of a rule book, the new version of the rule book and the blueprint. You have the reference architecture, the RAM, and you have support from the DSSC. Standardization is important for two things. First of all, bringing interoperability between the different implementations, and second, supporting innovation. So right now, there are multiple standardization initiatives happening, ongoing. First of all, at the international level, we are defining the data space concepts and terminology. In the middle, in Europe, at the Sensenelec level, we have the GTC 25. That is an answer to the European Commission standardization request for the Data Act, especially the Article 33 of the Data Act, that is talking about data spaces and interoperability. So we have different working groups in the GTC 25 working on those two topics. And the third standardization effort is done within the Eclipse Data Space Working Group, where we are specifying the different protocols to be implemented by the different connectors to facilitate interoperability. And what is important is that we have what we call liaisons between all those standardization organizations so that we can keep a good alignment between all those standardization efforts. They don't go in different directions. We try to do that. It's not always 100% perfect. So, at the end of the day, it's true that data space is a little bit complex. I've created this mind map 1 month ago because I wanted to view on one page all the necessary concepts to master if you want to deploy or create a new data space. And it's very complex. You have those notions of trusted data sharing, dimensions, regulation, data spaces, all those things that you need to know. But at the end of the day, a data space is just a trust context to enable data sharing. I think that Stephanie and Justine from the Flanders, digital Flanders, they said one key difficulty they had was how to establish trust between participants. That's the core of what data spaces are supposed to do. That's where we need to focus. If you want to explain to someone what a data space is, there's no need to talk about DCAT or very complex things, or DRL, all those W3C standards. You just need to say, it's a way to establish trust between participants. And the good news is that mechanism is not limited to trusted data sharing. That's something that you can use to share any kind of resource. The key mechanism of data spaces, we are building something very unique here. It's a way to establish trust between organizations. When I say organization, it could be government, citizens, B2C, B2B, whatever you want. It's a way to establish trust between participants. That's the key message. And that's it. On that slide that we are going to share, you find different resources, including the Data Space Manifesto that has been introduced by Lars yesterday. A very nice resource. And with that, I'm available if you have questions. You can send me emails or reach out to me on LinkedIn, or we can discuss during the breaks. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. That was really a high-level view, and the mind map was really complicated. And I hope you understand that it's not easy. So next is one of the most favorite, for me at least, is how different practices and technologies complement each other in the data spaces. So, and I think and this is the key topic to discuss. And I'd like to invite my colleagues Daniel Alonso, Klaus Otradowicz, Juan Hojero, and Sebastian Steinbus. And I'd like to give the mic to Klaus.
Thank you, Chandra. Full in the light. This is a joint presentation by the members of the DSBA. So we have the CTOs, Fireware, Wanyo, Sebastian, IDSA, Daniel, who's a technical lead in BDVA. Christoph is actually cannot travel, so he's not here, but you should also look at Christoph, the CTO from Gaia, and myself. And before starting, or when starting, I mean the deliverables in these 4 boxes. Most of you in the audience have been contributing to Fireware, to BDVA, to Gaia, to IDSA, but many of you will be asking, oh well, how does that then fit together, what I've been doing with my colleagues, with the other work that has been done in the other associations? And that's exactly what we are trying to explain and present tomorrow, today, as a joint presentation. I do like to start just with a picture of the Data Spaces Support Center, where we've been explained that there are, of course, in all of the use cases or in all the data spaces, a typical set of common building blocks. But there's a second notion. The blue box is the technical building blocks. The green box, as also Eric has explained before, will actually determine what kind of solutions, what kind of technology components you select in order to fulfill the specific regulatory, technical, economical requirements, just as Eric has explained before. So there is going to be different set of solutions that everybody will pick based on these types of requirements. And the question that has been brought up very many times in the sessions today, how do we ensure that we can provide interoperability in between different domain data spaces? How can we provide interoperability between different countries, different regions? And how can we make sure that the components that have been used can scale and can be used by as many as possible different types of implementations of data spaces? So if you look at that from a conceptual model, and I liked that Eric was starting to introduce this point of everything is about trust in the setup of organizations and stuff. If you look at it conceptually, what you do need to agree upon is one way to express the rules and requirements, the policies that have been set by the different data space governance authorities. So I call this here trust framework. Is sometimes a term that can be misunderstood, but it stands for one technical way to express the rules and the policies of the governances, so one data space can start to trust and accept what has been approved by another one. And the same is true for the signaling in between the different parties and the way on how you can actually start negotiating the stuff, one data space, one data sharing framework, ideally using a common technology. On top of that, you will have, ideally, as few as possible technical components that you can reuse to make it an efficient, scalable implementation of the data spaces, and all the value services on top of that to make use of the data, to make sure you can support all these AI use cases and what have you. And the very, very brief summary of this slide is the DSPA, the components. You see the colors in this picture of what such a scalable architecture for interoperable data spaces can mean is what we're going to present today, and we'll take one slice after the other. I thought there was a different slide, but as an important point, and I think it's very important for the audience, this actually does not imply that you have to use everything as we combine it. It's an offering. It's one way to do it very, very efficiently, but each of the associations also have projects where they're using different types of connectors, different types of trust frameworks. The pitch is a little bit, the 4 associations, show how you can build one complementary setup of specifications that actually make it possible to have the interoperable, scalable, efficient data spaces, not kicking out anybody else. Has been mentioned a lot, data spaces are typically decentralized. We will not all align on the same model of identities. We will not align on the same way on how we actually typically in the bottom down create trust. Decentralized systems is what we will have to support, different operators, different data space governance authorities. So the simple message in this slide is actually in line with what we've seen beforehand, that the solutions of the 4 associations have been built on an existing set of globally de facto standards, that web standards that are used by all of them. Now, if we come to the very, very point of what I wanted to, on our introduced, we have built a representation that shows on how the 4 associations complement each other. And we've seen this beforehand. Georges has talked about the need for a semantic. We have a column where we're describing where we provide support for concepts and semantics. We have the column where we provide where these associations provide support for the different protocols, and where we have software and services solutions. So we'll walk bottom to top, and I'll give a very, very brief introduction on what Gaia is doing. We talked about before, key things is trust and policies. You need to express that in a digital format. So we have a way to have a ground schema that is extensible, so each of the data space governance authorities can define or express the semantics for their own rules. Then we have a trust framework that is providing the protocol on how to actually generate this trust, the validation of the claims. Eric has formulated that very, very well. And not just in the digital realm, but also to traditional associations like Conformity Assessments Body in the ISO, in the Casco world. And then we have the software that is actually doing the technical implementation. How do you store the rules in the schema? How do you put the stamp on it, the verifiable credential issuer? And how do you evaluate the compliance to the rules of the data space governance? For instance, for automated onboarding, that's what a compliance service does. And then if we move not from the static composition of data spaces to how do we deal with transactions between all parties, I'm handing over to Sebastian.
Thanks a lot, Klaus. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, happy to present a little bit what IDSA is doing, and I would take the opportunity to take a hook on two questions that I received yesterday. The first one was, well, Sebastian, I think we have here a nice solution, but I think we don't know exactly what the problem was that we wanted to solve. Well, I know, I remember. Boris, I think you also do. So I think this is the main work of IDSA, doing this since a couple of years, working on the concepts of data spaces as a community with our members to come up with the core principles, what data spaces are, with our working group rulebook, with common architecture patterns, a common guidance for practitioners to build data space in the reference architecture model, but also to support that you can validate and verify if you're compliant, if you're implementing the right thing with certification and compliance proofs. That's the one aspect. And as I see that the community is growing, we are also working on trainings to make everyone really a data space expert. That's one of the key aspects that we are doing in IDSA. You know, but I'm the technical guy. And the other question that I received was, well, Sebastian, all of you say interoperability is a problem. So, and if that is the case, what is your key learning that we don't make the same mistake again that everyone did before? Well, and the answer is easy or complex. We have a lot of interoperability solutions already. We can solve most of the interoperability issues. But I know my journey and the IDSA journey. I remember when we had our first Plugfest with a lot of great IDSA members with their own connectors and they wanted to connect to each other. And all of them failed. Great. That was a key learning. And we learned from that since years, and we came up with one thing that is really missing for interoperability in data spaces. It's not replacing anything, it's something that is really missing, and that is the data space protocol. And that is also the reason why we came up with our things, where we fuel international standards. Thanks, Eric, for the presentation on that. 2151, for example, as international standard. Everything that's fueling JTC 25 is based on IDSA work and the work of our great community.
Thank you, Sebastian. So in terms of contribution with assets, what Fireware brings is, as you probably expect, open source. Open source that implement open patent-free specifications that will ensure interoperability and furthermore, very important components that help to make all these open specifications work together. And this is something we have been doing and contributing in this alliance, starting with the specifications on the trust framework. We leverage on the work made by GAIAX, also at the level of data space protocol, leveraging on the specifications coming from IDSA, and in both cases, also aiming at playing an active role contributing to further development of these specifications based on our implementation experience. This gets materialized in a number of components, starting with the data space components that are used, among other things, to implement the Fireware data space connector, but are meaningful and standalone and can be used for enrich existing connectors. By the way, yesterday there was a joint announcement between Prometheus X and Fireware in that direction of exchanging assets to create interoperable data stacks. Also, we are bringing components for creation of marketplaces. This was the basis for marketplaces like DOM in Europe, and also components for ensuring interoperability in the data plane. And here bringing components and APIs for that purpose, and as well a community-driven approach how to bring vocabularies and semantics that are needed to ensure full interoperability at all different planes in data spaces, and helping to support development of value creation services on top, which is what Daniel.
Thanks a lot, Juanjo. So yes, my colleagues here have explained how Gaia, IDSA, and Fireware are providing all the components to ensure a controlled and reliable environment to share data. But still, we have to connect this stack with the real market applications, real use cases, and also other instruments that are out there. Okay, so it is exactly where the BDBA data value creation framework comes into the picture. Okay, by this framework we mean a way, a quite coherent and also systematic way to be able to offer, but also provide and organize all the components needed to create value on top of data sharing. Beyond data sharing, but also as part of data spaces. Okay. In this framework, we have brought here those elements from our framework that we think fit better in this picture and that complement better what the other colleagues are providing. And also, I have to emphasize that for each of those components, we have specific task forces working in BDBA. Okay. Also, the nature of the different components is quite diverse. Okay, depending on the different actors working on that, ranging from, in some cases, just best practices or also recommendations based on our discussions, up to also software components coming from our members and projects. Okay, and here again you can see that at the core of our framework we position the data transformation. Okay, because we think that it's important to consider value creation on all the stages of data transformation. Also, as we have also here in the event, also AI applied to data spaces, to data management, but also AI application on top of data, and also leveraging the power of data. Also technical enablers to provide trustworthiness and compliance by design, and also to leverage our AI spaces as regulatory sandboxes, and also to provide also experimentation environments. So at the end, it's a matter of organizing and also providing all the technical enablers to generate value on top of data spaces and on top of data sharing. So I hand over to you, Klaus.
No, to Juanjo will be very, very fast. Yes, our next slide is simply elaborates further on this concept of how these assets can be combined together to create what we refer to as DSBA blueprint or DSBA integrated framework, which leverages on the specifications on the basis layer, trust and data space protocol, but bring full open source stack with components coming from the GaiaX community, the GaiaX lab, which help to accelerate the advent of components implementing and products implementing the trust framework. The Fireware data space connector with 3 distinguishable features. One is in full alignment with GaiaX specifications. Actually, next release coming end of this month, implement the latest version of the specs coming from GaiaX last November on the data space protocol, implementing existing specs, but also bringing a new binding contract negotiation based on TM4 specification. This is something we aim to contribute to the IDS community for discussion there. And on top of that, and a third distinguished feature is the support to OpenID for verified credentials protocols for ensuring human-to-machine interactions, machine-to-machine interactions, and full compatibility with initiatives like European Digital ID, and on top of that, components for Fireware marketplaces and interoperability at the data plane, supporting standards like NGSILD that supports digital twin exchange of data and data models. On top of that, the kind of services that Daniel described in the previous slide.
that's mine. Yes. That's mine. Yes, I didn't show that's a slide flip. Yes, thanks a lot. So, as Juanjo said, that's a DSPA blueprint, the DSPA with BDVA, Gaia X, IDSA and FiWare as a great collaboration to show how systems work, but we don't want to build data silos. I mentioned before, we are working on interoperable solutions. That means we need to be interoperable with different implementation. You need to find your solution that fits your use case. And this is one of the key features. Even while presenting one very clear and good solution based on FiWare, it needs to be connected to each and other data space solution as well. Otherwise, all our effort here is in vain.
The last slide beyond your coffee, which is just the very, very quick summary. Foundational standards, we basing on something that everybody agrees upon. Eric was using the term policy context. We offer the opportunity to have one set to implement policies for static and transactional work with IDSA and Gaia. We're working on a common terminology for the data space concepts and characteristics, and then we have a lot of components that help to build the different data spaces, fully recognizing that there's of course additional solution available. So this is not a pitch to be nasty against everybody else. And as you have noticed, we have barely managed to be within our 15 minutes. We have much more to detail on how the different things complement, to link it to use cases. And we will actually host in the next weeks in-depth webinar where we go in detail on how the interaction works, the use cases work, and how we do the translation from the rules to the trust framework to the transactions to marketplaces and identity access management systems. And with that, your coffee is ready. Thank you.